back to our second day of General Council 45. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for your patience. As we stated last weekend, it was our very first ever fully hybrid General Council meeting, and I know there were some technology challenges. I wanted to apologize to those who had problems voting or to connecting when they had requested to speak, and say thank you to Encore and to our staff and volunteers who've been doing all manner of tech support, troubleshooting, and creating smoother ways for us to proceed today for our second day of hybrid meeting. We've named this in the email that you received this week, but in case you missed it, we're going over the following proposals today. TICIF 01, Vocations of the Whole People of God. WOW 02, Administration of Sacraments for Retired Diaconal Ministers. GCE 02, Total Compensation. ECO 01, Making Sabbaticals Easier. BNS 01, Clergy Housing Assistance. CW 01, Mediation of Cost of Living Group Assignment Disputes. ECO 02, Reviewing M&P Committee's Role and Function. HF 04, Vocational Review and Disciplinary Accountability. ECO 04, Training on Conflict and Change. FSLDW 02, Modernizing Human Resource Models in the United Church of Canada. ECO 05, Change for Church Hub Access for Ministry Personnel. PM 05, Salary Continuance for General Council Office Staff. And PM 06, Denominational Pay Equity. And as a reminder, the way in which we name and number proposals is under the proposal section in CHIME, and it's titled GC45 Proposal Naming Conventions. This is the only time currently in the agenda that we will discuss these proposals. And just a reminder about the why of how we do things. So we previously did things in General Council where we would stand up on the floor of General Council and have debates about things, but not everybody felt comfortable and we didn't always have time to hear all voices. And so when we meet in discussion groups, rather than debating, we are having discussions about them, and the goal is for as many voices to be recorded as possible so that when that feeds into the Way Forward Committee, they're hearing from a significantly larger variety of perspectives and feelings and discerning voices from across the church. And so our goal is also to ensure that as many voices get heard on each of the proposals as possible. So in the discussion groups, our goal is not to debate the merits. We can ask clarifying questions or add perspectives when people share something that might change our perspective, but it's really a discussion rather than a debate to capture the full breadth of all of our commissioners who are here with us at General Council. What comes for decision in Calgary will reflect the input of our discussion groups, and so it's really important that we try to get through discussing every proposal. The Way Forward Committee will bring back for decision only proposals that have been considered by all discussion groups. Any matter that has to be referred will be because it has not been considered by all discussion groups, and it will be referred with the notes of the discussion groups that were able to cover it. I also wanted to share that there are 2 members of the National Indigenous Elders Council who are there are 3 who are commissioners. Those commissioners are Deb Anderson-Pratt, Ray Jones, and Agnes Spence. And Agnes and Deb will be present with us today and will serve as Indigenous elders for our online meeting today. The role of the Indigenous elders, if called upon, is to offer prayers, although as commissioners, of course, they may speak in discussion groups or to the floor of council, and they can vote. There will also be elders present during our meeting in Calgary, and as we noted on Sunday, the names of the Indigenous elders who will be present will be shared with you closer to the time. There are also 3 members of the Equity Support Team who are serving as chaplains for today's General Council meeting. The 3 people serving as chaplains are Amy Haynes, Sungran Kim, and Lawrence Muvunzi. If you would like to reach out to them for prayer or for pastoral counseling during today's meeting, please email equity@united-church.ca. That's equity@united-church.ca, and share your email or phone number, and one of them will get back to you. Friends, at this time, I invite the Reverend Dr. Miriam Spies to lead us in worship.
As we gather from our homes across the land, we acknowledge the indigenous peoples who care for and are cared for by these territories. They continue to fulfill the task given by Creator to be in relation with the land and our created beings. We recognize all of our responsibilities as treaty people to do likewise. Land acknowledgement is merely symbolic unless it is followed by action to bring us closer to reconciliation. Reflect on what a reconciled kingdom might look like in the place you call home.
Friends, hello. This tune, it's unusual for this tune we'll sing now to be paired with this text, but it was sung this way during the inaugural service of the United Church in 1925. So I invite you to sing the boldface type of each verse. Nous chanterons les paroles en gras comme suit, couplet 1 en anglais à gauche, puis 2 et 3 à droite, et finalement 4 en anglais. English, French, French, English.
Seigneur, tu nous rassembles aujourd'hui. Nous ne sommes pas une foule anonyme. Nous sommes des individus, les personnes de toutes les expressions de genre, des jeunes et des anciens, des invités et des habitués, des fidèles et des occasionnels. Tous nous sommes convoqués par ton évangile, appelés par notre nom, invités face à face. Seigneur, élargis nos cœurs, guéris notre sommeil, réveille notre ferveur. Amen.
Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy on us.
Dieu de la création, nous demandons votre pardon. Cette prière nous atteint tous en toutes. La montée de l'individualisme égocentrique érode la solidarité humaine. La concentration de pouvoir et des richesses au mépris des besoins de chaque personne. Le poison de l'intolérance religieuse et ethnique. L'avilissement de la dimension sacrée du corps humain et des passions humaines par l'exploitation sexuelle. L'illusion d'un progrès sans fin et d'une croissance sans limite menace notre demeure, la terre. De l'espoir latent fait glisser bien de gens vers une complicité indolente avec les empires et les systèmes de domination. Ainsi, nous chantons nos regrets et notre repentance.
Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy on us. Pour les troubles et souffrances de ce monde, nous t'offrons, Dieu, nos prières. Ta création tressaille de ses douleurs. Tends l'oreille aux cris des peuples opprimés qui ont perdu l'espérance. Viens, viens, ô Dieu, apporte ton salut. Donne-nous ta paix, la paix qui est le fruit de ta justice, qui anime et console. Pitié, Seigneur, donne ton pouvoir, la grâce à l'âme qui vit ton évangile. Viens vite, Emmanuel, Kyrie eleison. For the troubles and the sufferings of the world, Lord, we call upon your mercy. The whole creation's laboring in pain. Lend an ear to the rising cry for help from oppressed and hopeless people. Come, hasten your salvation, healing love. We pray for peace, the blessed peace mercy, Lord. We pray for power, the power that will sustain your people's witness until your kingdom comes. Kyrie eleison.
Friends, we are not alone. God is with us, creating and recreating, reconciling and transforming us and the world with grace. Thanks be to God.
Today's scripture reading is Acts chapter 2, verses 14 to 18. I'm going to read in Korean. 저는 한국 성서로 봉독을 하겠습니다. 베드로가 11 사도와 함께 일어나서 목소리를 높여서 그들에게 엄숙하게 말하였다. 유대 사람들과 모든 예루살렘 주민 여러분, 이것을 아시기 바랍니다. 내 말에 귀를 기울이십시오. 지금은 아침 9시입니다. 그러니 이 사람들은 여러분이 생각하듯 이 술에 취한 것이 아닙니다. 이 일은 하나님께서 예언자 요엘을 시켜서 말씀하신 대로 된 것입니다. 하나님께서 말씀하신다. 마지막 날에 나는 내 영을 모든 사람에게 부어주겠다. 너희의 아들들과 너희의 딸들은 예언을 하고 너희의 젊은이들은 환상을 보고 너희의 늙은이들은 꿈을 꿀 것이다. 그날에 나는 내 영을 내 남종들과 내 여종들에게도 부어 주겠으니 그들도 예언을 할 것이다. This is word of God.
Thanks be to God. Chantons ensemble, une fois en français, puis 2 fois en anglais.
Danse avec l'esprit dès le petit matin, bouge avec l'esprit toute la journée. Espère et chante la vie nouvelle et suis bien l'esprit qui nous guide en chemin. Dance with the spirit early in the morning, move with the spirit through the long day. Work and hope for the new life of morning. Listen to the spirit to show you the
One more time.
Dance with the spirit early in the morning, move with the spirit throughout the long day. Work and hope for the new life of morning. Listen to the spirit to show you the way.
Let us continue our praise and service with the Spirit in the work set before us today.
As the meeting leadership now moves into our meeting space, I invite you to review the clarifying questions in the Chime platform. The deadline for clarifying questions was Thursday evening, and we have not posted any new questions that have come in since then. We will see you in a few moments. Welcome back, friends. At this time, we move into a learning session on the Theology Interchurch Interfaith Ministry and Proposal presentation. So I'd like to invite the Theology Interchurch Interfaith Committee Co-Chair, Deborah Elliott, and Executive Minister of Theology and Ministry Leadership, Jennifer Jansen Ball, to introduce TICIF 01, Vocations of the Whole People of God, Ministries for Our Time. There will be a time for questions at the end of the presentation. If you have a question at that time, please be ready to click the Speak to the Floor button on the Engagement tab of the Chime platform. And as a reminder, if you're on Wi-Fi, it's helpful to be close to the source of your Wi-Fi, your modem or other Wi-Fi boosters, so that there's not a long delay in connecting as a speaker. And I'll remind us of this through our proceedings today, if you are in line as a speaker and somebody in front of you asks your question and you no longer need to speak, there is a button on the left-hand bottom side of your screen that will say leave the speakers list, and you can just click on that if somebody has already asked your question and it has been answered. So I will turn the meeting now to Deborah and Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. And welcome, Deborah. Our other TICIF co-chair, Michelle Owens, will be joining us later today. So Deborah and I will be co-presenting this morning, and we're just going to get our slideshow up on the screen, and then we'll start. Oh, there we go. All right, Deborah, over to you. Oh, we can't hear you.
Friends, we'll just give the tech team 1 second to get Deborah's audio patched in.
Can't hear anything. Can you hear me? Okay. All right.
Okay, try again, Deborah.
Sorry about that. The important thing here is to listen to why we have this. Now I can hear you, although there is an echo. All right. In 2020, I think it's better to turn it off. In 2021, the Ministry Streams Task Group submitted a report and proposal, Ministry Leadership to Meet the Needs of the Church in the 2020s. The 44th General Council received the report in 2022 and passed some elements of that proposal associated with the report, including mandating a revision to the 2012 Statement on Ministry, particularly to include a focus on lay ministries and the vocational life of all believers. It was requested that we expand the proposal and lift up various ways in which ministry is lived out in communities of faith and the world, expanding the number of people who feel valued in living out their vocations and ministries. In no way was it to detract from those in ordered ministry. It was to identify God's call to us in its different varieties. What this statement is not. It's not about particular leadership characteristics, nor is it about who is paid and who isn't. And it's not focused on the individual in various forms of ministry, unlike, for instance, the statements in 2012. The timeline of this was between 2020 and 2022, Ministry streams group work around ministry leaderships and context of the church. In 2022, GC44 mandated revising the 2012 Statement on Ministry to include a focus on lay ministries and the vocational life of all believers. In 2024, a small working group was established. 2 members from the Theology and Interchurch Faith Committee, of which I was one member, and 1 member from the Board of Vocation, and we had staff support from the Theology and Ministry Leadership Unit. We met regularly through 2024. In 2025, there was a draft statement on the vocations of the whole people of God, and that's what you're looking at now. Once the draft was done, we had a variety of consultations. We spoke with various networks in the United Church. We had a small survey of lay people and ministry personnel involved in the church in various roles, and data from previous consultations with diaconal, ordained, and designated lay ministers. That was also approached. So therefore, and then we reviewed these other United Church documents. The 1994 Theology of Call, the 2000 Ministry Together, the 2012 Statement on Ministry, and the 2022 Ministry Leadership to Meet the Needs of the Church in the 2020s. So you can see there was a fair amount of both research as well as consultation done. So some of the core theological concepts that were looked at. Ministry is offered by all disciplines in a variety of ways in the church and in the world. We wanted to focus on the community and the collective rather than the individual. We were lifting up the baptismal ministry vocation of all people. We wanted to make sure that all forms of ministry were equitably and affirmed and equal in designation. We looked at Paul's letters about the gifts present and needed in the church, and they were interpreted through a communal lens and not focused on the individual. So there were 2 understandings of ministry. The first, we speak of the ministry of the baptized being shared by the whole people of God. So that is the community. And in the second model, we take care to discern, call, and equip and hold accountable the people gifted and willing to serve in the church as its ordered ministers. So therefore, there's the ministry of the community as well as the personal ministry of people who have chosen to commit more to the church. The ministry can be understood as poetry, and that's you have to read this whole document in that sense. And it reflects various expressions of faith as they are lived out in the world and in the church individually and collectively. So the important thing here is to think of the Spirit calls the community as a whole, giving each and all a vocation to participate in the love of God in and for the world. Within community, we find and co-create together pathways to live our calls in ways that embody faith. The primary and foundational call of God to us is to be in community and thus to discern in what ways we offer ourselves as community in service to the world. Within community, each should be nurtured, supported, and even challenged in living out specific vocations and lives of faith. Here, I'll talk a little bit about my personal thing. I'm a physician, and so my calling and vocation in life is to be a healer. However, I need my community of faith to nurture me and provide me with the strength and affirmation to continue on doing my role in ministry to the wider community. And so that's the value of viewing this as a community that nurtures and helps everyone to live out their particular calling and vocation and ministry to the world. So I'm going to let Jennifer do this bit.
Thanks, Deborah. So in this part of the report, we offer some reflection on expanding on that understanding of the ministries of the community and are drawing particularly on the Trinity as a metaphor for thinking about community and about the interdependence that is foundational to life. And as a church, we are on a journey really to continue to decolonize, to become intercultural, to become anti-racist. And that includes looking at how we've predominantly understood ministry over the last several decades. I think we've had a shift more and more to a more individualistic kind of focus on ministry. And in this statement, we are offering a more communal and community-oriented kind of perspective. And so the Trinity as a metaphor helps us to think about that. And you'll see the image there of the DNA double helix. In the statement, we offer a short reflection from Catholic feminist theologian Elizabeth Johnson, who conceives of the Trinity as a triple helix, expanding on this double helix image of DNA. And she frames that within an eco-feminist kind of perspective, so that in keeping with that embodied metaphor of the Trinity, we also then understand ministry as an ecosystem. Each person of the Trinity is distinct, but each is necessary to the whole. And so that is the foundational kind of metaphor that grounds this statement and what we're offering to the church. And we want to also recognize the centrality of community in so many different cultures and expressions of being together in the world, and to offer that into the United Church as we continue in our journey to become intercultural and anti-racist. And so as we think about what that means then for the ministries of the church, we want to recognize that we have various ministries. They are distinct and necessary, and they are not sufficient by themselves. We need one another. And so the ministries of the laity are vital, and the ministries of the order of ministry are vital. And together, these ministries form this ecosystem of ministry within the church and offered to the world. And so as Deborah's already reflected, we really need our community, our communities of faith. We need the local, regional, and national expressions of ministry. We need each other in order to be nurtured, sustained, and challenged. To draw on Paul, the members of the body are all necessary for the whole. Back to you, Deborah.
Right. So no one thrives alone. We are not alone. Just like chaplaincies, campus ministries, youth ministries, and emerging forms of Christian communities, communities of faith must be understood as parts of the body rather than the body itself. This means that one minister per congregation is neither the norm nor the goal. Rather, a community of ministers, clergy and lay, nurturing and practicing faith together is the goal. Clergy and people of one or more communities of faith are working together as Christian ministers, mutually supported and accountable and committed to God's purpose in the world. Collaboration among communities of faith and between communities of faith and their neighbors. So this is more the goal, to expand how we envision what community is and how we support each other mutually. Ministries which serve the life and work of the church are often given offices of responsibility and accountability. These offices, for which lay people and ordered ministers are set apart for service, demand varying levels of commitment. Ministry is intended to be offered in the community and as community. The church has offices which are filled by both lay and ordered. I've already done that slide. We offered. Lay ministries are served in one or more short terms with freedom to move in and out of offices of service. Ordered ministry, both diaconal and ordained, lifelong office and required to carry and share the faith of the church itself. So we have different understandings of what each of these types of ministers are. Ordered ministers are set apart on behalf of the denomination to carry relationship with the denomination to communities of faith, including accountability. So therefore, we have some recommendations within this context of this paper. As the primary sphere of the church's ministry in the world, focus attention on nurturing and supporting people's lives of faith, bring the faith expressed in secular professions and vocations from the margins to the center of community of faith. We would like to work from an image of the desired whole, not from a collection of the surviving parts. So we need to think what our goal is and rethink rather than trying to fit in what we already have. We must call and equip people for cooperative models of ministry. That may need to teach people different skill sets. Free governance at the local level for maximizing cooperation, the ability to make teams, to have new ways of doing things and be creative in our solving of issues. We need to provide regional level resourcing, support, and oversight. At the denominational level, we need to enable and safeguard policy development, standards, and accountability. And we need to develop accessible forums for exchange of experience and resource sharing. One of the things is to clarify the means of support for all roles in ministry. One way would be make sure that we build in mentorship into all roles of ministry, to clarify lines of accountability for all roles in ministry, ensure means of creating teams for all the roles of ministry, and ensure that the pathway to ordered ministry takes into account the flexibility to maintain a second profession or occupation. A statement on ministry, such as this position paper, is at its heart a statement about how the church participates in the spirit-led work of love in our time, including through inspiring discipleship in community.
Thank you, Deborah. Moderator, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Deborah and Jennifer. At this time, we will have time for asking any final clarifying questions. And just a reminder that we are not discussing the proposal or debating the merits of what is being proposed in the proposal. We are just using this time to clarify that everyone understands the proposal. And again, if you have requested to speak and somebody in front of you asks your question and you no longer need to speak, you can click the leave button on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. So if you have a clarifying question for our presenters, I invite you to press, go to the engagement tab on Chime and press the request to speak button. That might be Deborah, maybe. Have any clarifying questions? Just a tech support reminder from last weekend. If you were watching the live stream in full screen mode, if you're on a tablet, you can swipe to get rid of the live screen thing to go to your engagement tab on Chime, or you can just hit escape if you're on a computer. All right, I recognize Adrienne Cormier.
Hi, I just wanted to confirm the
Adrienne, can you start over because you had to wait just a second for the audio to patch in.
Understood. Sorry. Am I audible now?
And just a reminder to introduce yourself and if you're a commissioner or corresponding member, and which region you're from.
Adrienne Cormier, they, them, from First on Eastern Edge, and I'm a commissioner. I just want to clarify, so the statement on ministry is not in and of itself like a policy or action. It's a statement used to guide other policies and actions within the church, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And I recognize Heather McDougall. Again, if you can remember to introduce your name, your region, and your role, corresponding member or commissioner.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Heather McDougall. I'm from St. Lawrence, John Waters region, and I am a commissioner. My question is around, for clarification, is there's a lot of talk about a cooperative and been thought into what kind of training that would, what kind of training would happen in our colleges where that was happening.
Thanks, Heather. That's a great question. And yes, we've flagged that there are likely new skills and ways of being in ministry that will need to become part of the theological education and formation that happens in our schools and through the experience-based field placements and supervised ministry education that happens, and to recognize that there are also people who are already engaged in cooperative ministries. And so we are in touch with them to gather learnings about what they have learned on the ministry and to bring that into then the conversations about the theological education and formation that's needed.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Jen. Charles Donnelly.
Yes, Charles Donnelly from Shining Waters Regional Council. I'm the commissioner. The report suggested one of the actions that need to be taken is to free government at the local level. What are some of the examples that you would have to be changed to accomplish this?
So one of the examples is if we're thinking about a cooperative model of ministry that might include, say, 5 churches sharing a team of ministers together, lay people and order of ministry, we don't need 5 or 6 ministry and personnel committees having oversight of that. So can we have one M&P committee or something like that? We also don't need, therefore, probably 5 boards that would oversee all of that. So just looking at options and examining the ways in which our current governance might be limiting in a way it wasn't ever intended to limit, but how can we then adjust that to address these new realities?
Thank you.
All right, there have been no other requests for clarifying questions, and so we want to offer our thanks to Jennifer and to Deborah and to Michelle, the other co-chair, and to the entire Theology Interchurch Interfaith Committee. And I spoke too soon. We have one more request for questions, and we have time to accommodate it. So I recognize Ryan McNally.
Thank you, Moderator. Ryan McNally, East Central Ontario Regional Council, he, him. I had a question. The word bivocational is popping up a lot in United Church circles. And I'm wondering if the task group that really sort of dug into what does bivocational look like in the Canadian context. Do we have some information about that? And also some of the ethical issues that might arise. For example, if you're both a counselor and you work in a congregation and you're doing some counseling for pay of your members of your congregation, those kinds of issues.
So we have looked a little bit at bivocational realities, and one of our faculty at the Atlantic School of Theology, Ross Bartlett, has been doing research on that. So we've had conversations with him. There obviously is more work to do around articulating bivocational ministry. Your particular example of being a counselor and also in ministry, we do already actually have some standards, ethical guidelines in terms of counseling in the United Church. And Deborah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yes, and it would. Part of the, it would be, there would have to be some discussion about what's happening with.
Deborah, would just give us 1 second, because I think it's echoing for you. It's also echoing for us here, and we're not sure why, because all of our microphones are off.
Is this better? I
Yes,
think
go
I'm
ahead.
Yeah, I'm now frozen.
No, you're okay. You're not frozen, and we can hear you.
All right. Yes, so there would have to be some discussion, of course, with whoever the governing body of whoever, like the counseling. So there are issues around working in various places, boundary issues, and those can all be negotiated and discussed. And yes, there are some ethical issues, but that can all be clarified with understanding and discussion. So it is possible to do, but we would have to make sure that people understood what the limits were for each of those tasks and vocations.
All right. Thanks for that final question, Ryan, and thank you again to Jennifer, to Deborah, and Michelle, and to the entire committee for the faithful work you have done. At this time, we will be leaving this aside for our discussion groups, and we'll be moving on to our next presentation, where Alan Hall, Executive Minister for Shared Services, and Jane McDonald, member of the General Council Executive and Chair of the Total Compensation Review Task Group, and also Chair of the Finance Advisory Committee, will present on the Total Compensation Review proposal and presentation. And just a reminder that there will be time again for clarifying questions at the end of the presentation. And so if you have questions at that time, you will use the request to speak to the floor button. Alan and Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Moderator. Thank you for the time today to introduce the work of the Total Compensation Review Task Group. This work was commissioned by the 44th General Council and is in response to several proposals that raised concerns about equitableness and adequacy of compensation and retirement benefits. The task group quite literally covered from coast to coast. We had members all the way from Newfoundland to Victoria, BC on our group. The complement was ordered and lay individuals involved, active and retired members, and we met every other week for close to 2 years. Alan?
Yeah, this was an exceptionally complex piece of work. I think I said to the executive at one point that it was perhaps the most complex piece of work that I've been engaged in the 15 years in my role. There were so many related but not dependent factors to look at. We had payroll data from our payroll service, identity data from the Leadership Council survey, input from over 1,100 lay and ordered members, General Council commissioners and executive members, national and regional staff leadership, peer denominations, and multiple external data sources. So pulling all of these pieces together indeed did take us every other week for 2 years.
So we started off by reviewing our current system, and early on we discovered that ministry is a very unique vocation, and it's very difficult to find direct comparisons out in what we might call the real world. The current system that we have is a minimum, where the national church sets a minimum, and ministry personnel are given the opportunity to negotiate a higher salary if they feel it's appropriate. Next slide, please. The majority of ministers are paid above minimum levels. Although we heard anecdotal evidence that most ministers were paid at minimum salaries, there is only 11% of the ministry personnel that are paid at minimum. Next slide. We looked at 2 years of data, and we wanted to make sure that what we were looking at with respect to data and some of the equity pieces we saw some statistical differences in 2023, and that's why we wanted to hold off until we had some data from 2024 to see if these things were actually real that we were seeing. And in the 2024 data, the only significant difference that we saw across the equity groups was that women identifying as 2S LGBTQIA+ were being paid a higher salary than males of the same equivalent. Next slide, Ellen.
The task group looked at a number of alternative models of compensation, and to see if there would be a model that would be more suitable, that would be more equitable for the church. We identified a couple that seemed to have potential, and thank you to those who participated in the online consultations, delving into those models. But at the end of the day, the conclusion was that while there are deficiencies in both practice and principle to some aspects of our current model, overall it is working as it was designed to work. It is intended to set a minimum floor, and then microeconomic conditions and specifics of a position factor in and get negotiated above minimum by the individuals and the site of appointment or call. Because there was some deficiency that would potentially allow for some inequities is in oversight of the establishment of the terms at the beginning of an appointment or call. And we address that in our recommendations, and ensuring that regional councils have aggregate data and information about trends in their region and within cost of living groups that would allow them to better support both the ministry personnel and the communities of faith in arriving at that salary above minimum. Overall, I think implementing a new model, well, we concluded, but also with input from the executive, concluded that implementing a significantly new model at this time would require extensive resources and leadership development and dollars, which at this time are better invested in other aspects of moving our church forward into the second century.
So some of the issues that we kind of discovered, and they're certainly not new, is that there's an increasing level of part-time positions. Communities of faith are becoming smaller, and there seem to be some barriers to forming collaborative ministries. So next slide. Ministers living in manses were also not being compensated on the current cost of living model. So that is in one of our recommendations. Originally, they were not included in cost of living because the cost of living was totally based on housing, but we have currently moved to a basket of goods. So therefore, we're highly recommending that ministers who live in manses will be applied to the cost of living model. Category F is heavily weighted in the number of ministry personnel, and we did discuss the fact of whether we should have further categories, which might actually alleviate some of the need for some negotiation. The people in category F ranged from 14 years to 47 years, so there's a vast range of people and experience in that group. One other thing we discovered in our work is in our talks with the Indigenous people within the United Church, that the current model that we use is not compatible to the realities of the remote Indigenous church. Next slide. We also, Alan, that one's yours, I guess.
You'll see in the report a number of recommendations, some of which were adopted by the executive of the General Council within its authority, and others are for your consideration as a General Council and as commissioners. So at a high level, some that I'd point to: one, a revision of the manual reference to providing community of faith responsible for providing an adequate compensation, that we parallel that with the statement in the General Council staff system compensation policy to read just, fair, equitable, and adequate remuneration. Another is to a commitment to provide regional councils annually with payroll data, aggregate payroll data, that will allow them in their pastoral oversight role, especially at the time, as I said, of an appointment or call, to better ensure compatibility of terms with those within the region. Encourage regional councils to be more proactive in assembling part-time positions to provide a full-time opportunity. her full-time equivalent, rather than leaving it to the minister to be primarily responsible for coupling together multiple pieces to have full-time work. As well, we noted that there needs to be some work done to identify and eliminate bylaws that complicate cooperative and collaborative ministry employment. And Jennifer Jensen Ball spoke to one example of that just a moment ago. There are several, do you have 4 employers or do you have 1 employer? Do you have 4 making motions in regards to the full-time equivalency or 1? So a number of things. We as a task group didn't do the work to identify all of those aspects that might need to be adjusted. That would be work of a future group if that's adopted by the council.
Next slide, please. So some of the recommendations, some further recommendations, as I mentioned already, is assigning the cost of living groups to the communities of faith that provide amounts to the ministry. Work with the leadership and the wisdom of the National Indigenous Church to develop a compensation model and appropriate funding for that model that is relevant to the remote Indigenous communities of faith. We did find that there was quite a discrepancy, and the funding of the model that's currently being used is kind of out of date. So we need to find a way to support that work in our church. Explore with the Indigenous leadership the additional resources and supports that are necessary for our Indigenous ministry personnel, specific to the context of remote Indigenous ministries. And the fact is that, they likely need more support because of where they are located in our country. It makes it difficult for them to build clusters, to have emotional and psychological support for themselves in the work they're called to do. Next slide, please. The annual economic adjustment, we did quite a bit of research around that, and we talked to a number of groups, and we looked at a lot of research around the annual economic adjustment, and we came to discover in our research that 3% is a mean value of what the annual economic adjustment has been over a number of years. So we are recommended to the General Council Executive that if the value is 3% or less, that would be automatically applied as the annual cost of living increase. If it was above 3%, there would be some people in the General Council office that would do some research and make a recommendation to the GCE for that increment. We looked at the feasibility and acceptance of a centralized payroll administration. There was a lot of positives around this when we had our focus groups, and we appreciate that, and we do feel that it may be something that is worth investigating further, and that's why it falls in our recommendations. And the other thing, and perhaps our terminology was wrong in our proposal, we mentioned expanding the base of participation in the Leadership Counts equity group. And what we're really wanting to see is encourage people to participate in the Leadership Counts, because the Leadership Counts data is the data that we used to run our statistical analysis on our equity groups. And we only had, I think, around 60% of the people participated, if I'm correct, Alan, and we get stronger statistics and therefore can make better decisions if we have more data. So we would strongly encourage everyone to participate in the Leadership Counts equity study. So next slide, please. This one's yours, Alan.
Yeah. So we identified 3 clarifying questions that some people have been raising. We thought we'd take a moment to speak to them. The first was in regards to the equity data and no statistically material inequities being apparent in what we saw, and how this squares with the anecdotal reports of significant inequities. I'm not sure that we could square it, but we looked at the data, and the data did indicate that there were no significant inequities appearing. We postponed posting the report until we could have an opportunity to fully analyze the 2024 data, just to confirm that, because it is at odds with the anecdotal data. The 2024 data confirmed what we saw in the 2023 data. We temper this with the caveat that some equity-seeking groups in the identity data are very small, and in Indigenous identifying groups, not enough to use. But nonetheless, the data is relatively solid, and so it's with confidence that we bring this statement to you. What we note in our report, and I've mentioned, is that the most vulnerable points for inequity are unlikely to be addressed with compensation policy or model changes, more effectively addressed by oversight at the point of initiating a call for appointment. Thus, the recommendation to provide the regional councils with compensation profiles annually that will allow them to better exercise their oversight responsibilities and to catch any emerging inequities that may be coming up.
Next slide, please. The report also indicated that the system that we're currently using, although it is not perfect, we will fully acknowledge that it, in some situations, it may not be working for people. But what it does do is, with our cost of living groups, it tries to allow for an equal buying power no matter where you live across the country. So you might see that cost of living group 6 has got a higher salary, but typically they're in a situation in this country where things cost more. We also see that, and we've mentioned that about 88% of our ministers are negotiating a salary above the minimum. We understand that from a cultural perspective, this is not something that some people are comfortable with, but it seems to be working for most people. Again, we don't say that the system is perfect, but we do feel that based on our statistics, it seems to be working for most people. So next slide, please.
Jane spoke to this point earlier, but I'll note it again. The original regional cost of living groups were based solely on the cost of housing in the vicinity of each community of faith. Where housing was provided with a manse, housing was not a factor in the base salary in these locations because the housing is provided. Now that we have moved to regional cost of living groups based on a basket of goods, services, taxes, and housing, it is relevant to communities of faith providing a manse. Therefore, it's recommended that where a manse is provided, that a regional cost of living group be assigned and the base salary adjusted accordingly.
So I just want to thank everyone that participated on our committee. Next slide, please.
One more.
One more. So I want to thank everybody that participated on our task group. They were all diligent and passionate about the work that we did, and we can't thank them enough for giving up so much of their time. So we're open to, moderator, we're open to questions now if anyone has questions.
Thank you to Alan and to Jane and to all of the members of your task group and other staff who supported this work. I see Sarah Giles. And just a reminder that our time is for clarifying questions, not to speak to our perspectives on the proposal or to debate the proposal. Those discussions will happen in discussion groups. So Sarah, can you remember to introduce yourself, your region, and your role?
Yes, thank you. My name is Sarah Giles. I am a commissioner from Living Skies region. I'm just wondering if you could define minimum salary. What exactly are you using as the definition of minimum salary?
Annually, the General Council executive approves a cost of living adjustment, which is applied to the salary schedule that is published annually. The mandate of the General Council is to establish minimum compensation, and that's done with that salary schedule. So that's our reference to minimum, the national minimums that have been provided in 2000 something. We moved to a minimum salary schedule that incorporates 6 regional cost of living groups, based, as I said earlier, initially on cost of housing, but now on a cost of a variety of expenses that we draw down from federal finance data, and so there are actually 6 minimums, if you will, depending on where you live.
Could I ask a follow-up question to that? So then are you looking at only the monetary minimum, or is the vacation minimum included in what you're looking at as a holistic minimum salary? So if I have the minimum salary plus 1 extra day of vacation, would I be considered as having the minimum salary or no?
So we looked at the monetary value of salary, and that, of course, is the largest piece and most obvious piece that people look at. But this was a total compensation study, and so we did look at and identify the assortment of benefits that employees in the denomination, particularly ministry personnel, have, and you cite vacation. 1 month, 5 Sundays, I think, is what's stipulated in the manual, and that would be the minimum. We didn't adjust that or recommend changes to that, but we certainly heard that many ministry personnel negotiate additional vacation time that would be over and above the minimum.
I'll just add, perhaps we may not have been clear at the beginning, but what we did was we took the payroll data from ADP and matched it with those that we could from the leadership counts, and that was the data set that we used. So it would have been strictly your payroll data that we were looking at, not any other benefits when we were talking about salaries.
It is a complex, it was a very complex study, and with not access to all of the data. Thank you, Sarah, for your clarifying question. I see 3 more requests to speak, and we have about 11 minutes left before we move on in the schedule. So I will call Carolyn Giesbrecht. And please remember to introduce yourself. Thank you. I did. I called Carolyn Giesbrecht. Carolyn Giesbrecht has requested to leave. Okay, Wilson Ganesi.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, Jane and Alan, for your compensation report. You mentioned the negotiating for compensation with cultural differences. My question is, how does it work for somebody who is coming in through the admissions process with no clue and not even the courage to be able to stand and speak for themselves? I'm talking from experience as somebody who came through the admission process. It's a bit difficult for somebody to stand up and say, I'm just coming from where I'm coming from into a community of faith and say, I want more salary when I'm in the admissions process or even when I'm admitted. That's a very hard thing to do with acknowledging really the difference in cultural perspectives, where negotiating seems like you're asking for more or demanding for more when people don't even know how you work as a ministry personnel. That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, good point, Will. And we heard some reflection on that from some ministers who have come through the admission process. I guess our sense was that the model, the current model, is vulnerable there, but the vulnerability can be better addressed by the supports that surround the incoming minister from the regional council perspective in ensuring that the terms of the call or appointment are fair, that they are consistent with terms in other communities of faith within that area. And so by providing the payroll data on an annual basis, the regional councils will be better equipped to provide that kind of support and encouragement.
Just a little further, the liaisons, who are the ones that work with the community of faith, they can be encouraging to, when reviewing a minister who's coming in through admissions, their expertise that, you know, they're bringing with them, because in most situations they're bringing years of ministry with them, which has value. So I think that it's an education process, but with the data that Alan was speaking to, we hope that this will help moving forward.
Thank you, Alan and Jane. I see Laura Swan.
Hi, good morning. Laura Swan, she, her. I'm from Antler River Watershed, and I'm a commissioner. My question is, was there any consideration in this research on incorporated ministries that may have a kind of hybrid version of compensation in terms of, I'll use myself as an example, who works in an outdoor/camp ministry. I still live in a manse. Perhaps my staff still have benefits provided by UCC, but not payroll. Were any of these things taken into consideration as part of the research or the study?
We didn't look at incorporated ministries. Our mandate was employment within communities of faith and the staff system of the General Council, Regional Council office. We do have some provisions in our benefits to ensure that ministry personnel who are working in United Church related organizations still have access to benefits like pension and group health. But we didn't delve into the compensation practices within those incorporated ministries.
Thanks, Alan. Bob Fillier.
Musi Cho, moderator. Je m'appelle Bob Fillier, Cletley Tene KO, also known as Prince George Pacific Mountain Regional Council. I have two quick questions. One is, do you have an operative definition for the term adequate? It seems to be a very broad term that could be interpreted by all kinds of folks. I appreciate the answer in the response section around who would be responsible for determining quote unquote adequate, but some kind of piece around that. And the second question is, if we have 88% of folks being paid above the minimum, then does that not suggest that the minimum isn't actually the minimum? It's actually higher than that, to whatever that minimum of that 88% negotiation is, that the floor, so to speak, is actually higher than where it currently is. So do we anticipate changing that minimum?
I think speaking to that, I think that could be something that could be looked at in the future. I think what we were looking at was the data that we had available, and we think that there are places that, you know, ensuring perhaps more categories than A through F. We also looked at peer denominations, and there were some differences between the United Church and other churches. So I think that was a recommendation that we do more research on that, and that all of those factors where more research is really required could have an effect on what our minimums would be moving forward.
Regards to adequacy, Bob, that's a good question, because we certainly heard from treasurers, and we met with several hundred treasurers, and for them, adequate is balancing the budget. We heard from ministry personnel that the challenges that a household cannot live on a single income ministry salary. And we heard individual single ministers saying how difficult it was to be in a single income household with no one to share the expenses with. I think that those concerns and experiences are not unique to ministry. They are common to the Canadian environment at this time. What we did do is identify roughly comparable professions and vocations and look at their salaries. And what we saw was that minister salaries are not significantly out of line with many of those other career paths. We have fewer opportunities, perhaps, in the marketplace, in the labor market, if you will, to find jobs and get jobs. We have, in a sense, a captive labor pool for ministry personnel, because we can't just pick up and become an Anglican priest tomorrow. And there may not be a whole lot of opportunities within a region to move to if you're looking to improve your compensation that way. But relatively across a number of sectors, ministry personnel compensation is comparable. So that leads to some conclusion that there is a modicum of adequacy to our compensation, even if we all wish we made more.
Thank you,
Michelle, your
Alan.
moderator.
Thanks, Bob. Friends, we have 2 minutes left on the schedule for this discussion, and there are 9 more requests to speak. I'm going to perhaps ask the folks who are in line to speak to ask their question, and I'm going to ask Alan and Jane to take really good notes and respond to the questions together, so that way we get the questions out there. And I will cede part of my time for the time with the moderator to ensure that people are clear on this proposal before we go into discussions. So next in line, Penny's gone? Okay, so Emma Simone.
Thanks, moderator. Emma Simone, Prairie to Pine Commissioner. I was wondering if you looked at the difference between ministers who are called to rural congregations versus ministers that are called to urban or suburban congregations as part of your equity analysis.
Super, thanks, Emma. Stephen Loweth. Okay, Stephen appears to have disappeared, so I'll go to the next speaker, Judy Zarabek.
So thank you, moderator. Judy Zarubik, Western Ontario Waterways, she, her, and I am a commissioner. So my question is about the national pay system, and you said that it wasn't going to be fiscally responsible to do that. I'm wondering what that does. Are we, when this report looks at the ministers that are here, how do we help those who want to become ministers through this immigration and the national pay system, whether that would help us clear up some of those people who are waiting? Thank you.
Thank you. Next question comes from Liz McKenzie.
Thank you, moderator. I'm Liz McKenzie. I am a commissioner. I'm in Shining Waters Regional Council. I'm also the chair of the Equity Task Group of the Pastoral Relations Commission for Shining Waters. And I have 2 quick questions. The first is, in terms of the data, I really appreciate the aggregate payroll data going to the regions. I'm wondering, for urban situations, whether there will also be an opportunity to get data that is more localized for a group of congregations in a specific region of that urban center, because in Toronto it does make a bit of a difference in terms of what we've been seeing. We've just finished a compensation negotiation handbook for Shining Waters, and we have identified that that is really important to help ministry personnel adequately negotiate adequate and equitable salaries. So that's my one question. And secondly, I'm wondering, based on the identification of 86% above minimum, getting above minimum, and looking at that situation and raising the minimum based on that, whether that has to wait another 3 years or whether that can proceed more quickly, because 3 years is a long time for people to wait.
Thank you. Adrienne Cormier.
Hi, Adrienne Cormier, they, them, First on Eastern Edge. I'm a commissioner, and I just wanted to know what the rationale was behind the cost of living adjustment being set at 3% for ministry personnel versus 2.5% for office staff, if I understood correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne. Jennifer Pakula.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Pakula, and I am she/her, Treaty 5, and a commissioner for Prairie to Pine. I live in a small, isolated northern community that's not Indigenous, and I was wondering if any consideration had been given to an equitable burden upon communities of faith, in addition to equitable compensation for ministry personnel. Thank you.
And Cindy Casey.
Yes, hi. I was just wondering, when you mentioned increased training for Minister of Pastoral Relations around the guidelines and the like how to negotiate that sort of percentage up. A few years ago, you had a really good description of how to do that. I benefit personally from using that. And I'm wondering if something like that will be part of that so that we can sort of address the equitable platform for everybody to be able to go in regardless of how they might feel about that. It certainly wouldn't have been a strength of mine, and that helped a lot. And I don't know if that's something that's going to be maybe highlighted to ministers of pastoral relations. That's it. Thank you.
Stephen Loweth. Stephen Loweth, I see him on the speakers list. All right. Stephen, we're not able to connect with you. So that is all of the requests to speak I see from, oh, is there one more? Oh, Cindy Casey, isn't that who just spoke? Okay, Cindy Casey is the last speaker. And then I will let Alan and Jane answer the questions. I was right. That was Cindy Casey. So I will turn to Alan and to Jane to give a brief answer to that summary of very long questions. Thank you.
Thanks, moderator. We did break the data down into rural and suburban. I think when we looked at it through across cost of living groups too, and there was we didn't see significant differences. We understand that rural ministry is totally different than suburban or urban ministry, but from the payroll data, we didn't see significant differences. Anything you want to add to that, Alan?
No.
Okay. With the question on the centralized payroll system, I don't think that would expedite the admissions group of people that are kind of waiting in line. I think that's a pastoral relations issue. And the centralized pay system, I think part of it was the cost of implementing any large change, whether it be a grid system, centralized pay system. At this point in time, we in discussion with GCE, it was that energy needed to go into, as Ellen mentioned, where our church is going in its next 200 years. With Liz's question on the urban situations, with the data that would go to the regional councils, all those urban churches would be included in that data, and you could pull that out as a subset. So if you were looking at all of the churches within Toronto, that data could be pulled out as a subset to do a comparison on that. You mentioned also raising the minimum weight for 3 years. First of all, the research needs to go into what would be appropriate, and also balancing what our communities of faith and our ministry personnel expectations might be over time. So I think that's a body of work that still has to be done. So we in our task group could not guarantee that that would happen over the next year or the next 2 years. That's something that, if there's another task group that's pulled together, would work on. The rationale around 3.0 to 2.5, as you realize, a few years ago, the General Council Executive decoupled the General Council Office system to the Pastoral Relations system. And during the last couple of years, there's been different percentages for those two systems. This task group is going back to, if the cost CPI is 3% or less, that amount, say it was 2.7, that amount would be applied against both the General Council Office and the Pastoral Relations system. Jennifer mentioned equitable burden versus equitable compensation from a remote community. That's not something that fell within the purview of this task group, but I think that's something that would need to be considered as to, are we offering the appropriate supports to any ministry that's in a remote location? And the last lady's comments around addressing the issue of negotiation, that's a valuable tool if that's something that regional councils can support through their liaisons or through ministers. I'm not sure whether that could happen at the national level or at the regional level, but certainly have perhaps some webinars around how to negotiate appropriately. So that's the information that I had. Alan, is there anything you wanted to add?
Just note on that last point, we heard Liz mentioned, and I think we were aware that Shining Waters was working on a resource for to support people in negotiating, and we are looking forward to seeing that piece of work and using it to augment the resource that is currently available nationally.
Hopefully that's answered everyone's questions, and we'll look forward to what debate comes up at the discussion groups.
Thank you so much to Alan and to Jane, to your task group members, and to staff support. There were a couple of people that were requesting to speak and were somehow getting disconnected, and so would invite you to email the General Council 45 email address, gcinfo@united-church.ca, if you were not able to, due to technological challenges or low bandwidth, if you were not able to connect to speak. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our former moderator, the very Reverend Dr. Richard Bott, for time with the moderator.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Richard Bott. My pronouns are he and him. I am currently a member of Horseshoe Falls Regional Council, and by virtue of my office, I am a commissioner. And so I said all of that because I needed to give the moderator time to realize that I'm giving it back to her. I'll keep the chair, but over to you, Maud.
Thank you. My name's Carmen Lansdowne. My pronouns are she, her, and I have had the distinct pleasure of serving as your moderator for the last 3 years. In addition to my written report, which you will have all received through the Chime platform, I just had 5 super short points. I'm glad I wrote them down now that I've given myself 10 minutes less time. and want to leave a couple of minutes for questions if you have them. The first is just as we go into the future to remember that we are all on the same team. We have used in the book club, but I know many of you have also used Janet Gear's amazing work in her book, Undivided Love, or also the processes that are shared as a resource in Leadership, which is a leadership development resource out of Pacific Mountain and Shining Waters region, I think primarily Pacific Mountain, but it's a really helpful tool for self-reflection to understand the different ways that we understand who we are as a church, and to remember that we are all on the same team and that our passions and frustrations come out of a deep faith and a deep love for this church. The second is that I think that we do have work to do to address the work context, especially of paid accountable ministry personnel, and that we have to decide what kind of an employer we want to be for those set aside for the order of ministry. It's been a deep privilege to have so many ministry personnel across the church talk about the ways in which being set aside for ministry is also a challenge, because as our church has aged, that we haven't always kept up with best practices in terms of what it means to be an employer at the congregational level. We also are faced with the financial resources of the church, and we have to hold those things in tension, but we need to do them in a way where we honor and respect each other. And so I'm so pleased to see so many proposals coming to this General Council that are helping us to how to discern exactly that. That we need to recognize the leadership and presence of children, youth, and young adults. We often talk in the church about how the future of the church is our young people, but actually they are the church now, and we need to be prioritizing resources to do ministry for this this generation who is in the first third of their lives, because otherwise we're saving the church for a people who will not have been ministered to. And I continue to see a huge variance in the focus on children, youth, and young adult ministry across the regions and across congregations. And sometimes there's like, well, we don't have a children's ministry because there's no children here, but children and young people will never come to your church unless you create the ministry for them. And it's a very chicken and the egg problem, but where I see huge signs of growth and hope is when congregations have decided to invest in making space for young people, that the young people are showing up. And I wanted to share that. And then finally, just to thank all of the community of faiths who are participating in our commitment to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions over the next 5 years, either by making your buildings more efficient or by switching to renewables. It's overwhelming, but the climate emergency is the single biggest threat to our existence and to our thriving on the planet. And all of those incremental changes make a huge difference, and especially around how we heat and cool our buildings. We like to pick especially on discretionary spending on travel, but the truth is all of the air travel in Canada, both business travel, vacation travel, nonprofit travel, only makes up 6% of our national greenhouse gas emissions, but 64% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from how we heat and cool our buildings. And so thank you to all of the communities of faith across the church for doing the hard work of making small changes and big changes wherever possible. Wallace Gas have for your commitment to responding to the climate emergency, because it takes all of us. And that's all I wanted to say in addition to my written report.
Thank you very much, Moderator. Friends, I would turn to you to ask, are there any questions of the Moderator? And I'm just going to wait to see if there's anything coming on the screen here. So I would recognize Emma Simon.
Thanks. So Emma Simone, Prairie to Pine. I was just noting that you mentioned sort of how we heat our buildings. And I'm also cognizant that we've recently paused the Faithful Footprints program for review. And I was wondering if you any thought as to when it's going to get back online? Because I think it has been very successful in dealing with that.
I'm actually going to ask the General Secretary to answer that question. That's more his wheelhouse.
Thanks, Moderator. Just to say that we are looking at how we will continue to fund the program. Already, the monies we have set aside for this year has already been committed by all the folks who have applied. So we're having some conversation about how else we may be able to fund this. So probably in the next couple of months, we may be able to say what will be next.
Thank you, General Secretary. Thank you, Moderator. I would turn to Penny Nelson. Thank you, Penny. You can go ahead.
Sorry, moderators, my audio was not working. Penny Nelson, Bermuda, Nova Scotia Regional Council. I use she, her pronouns. I didn't start my video. So I was privileged to be a part of the Moderator's Leadership Program, the Regenerate Program. And Carmen, I wonder if you might be willing to talk a little bit about some of the positive changes that you've seen from the Regenerate Program, or what you hope that might tell us about the future of the church that you've seen out of Regenerate. Also, thank you for your leadership.
Thanks, Penny. Way to give me 36 hours to integrate everything. The Regenerate program ended at noon on Thursday. I mean, so for context, because I don't think it was always clear to the wider church, the Regenerate program was born out of a planning retreat I had in January of 2023, where I was thinking we were in this experimental phase of not arranging immersion trips for the Moderator to the regions. If you remember, 2022 seems like a million years ago, but we were still like not yet in the transition from pandemic to endemic phase of COVID. And out of the group of folks that invited me, or that I had invited to come and plan how I would use my time, there was a desire expressed on behalf of the ordered ministry personnel who were there to invest in leadership. And I think that the shifts in confidence and clarity, the way folks were deeply grounded in their sense of call and their commitment to the church. One of the requirements was that you had to be willing to be an active leader in the church for at least another 15 years. That was one of the questions on the application, and that didn't mean it had to be 15 years before you retired, but that you would continue to be present in leadership in the church for 15 years. And it was, the capstone projects that the Regenerate participants did have really balanced both the needs of individual communities of faith, or the roles that folks were playing in staff positions in their regional councils or for the national church, but also held that intention with the whole context of who we are as a denomination. We're really deeply grounded in our call and vision to be a church of deep spirituality, bold discipleship, and daring justice. And the thing that I think we could have anticipated but didn't understand the depth of what would happen was the deep collegiality and bonding of the people that were brought together in the Regenerate program. And we're blazing walnuts for life, and I love you all.
Thank you, Moderator. We have 2 people on the speakers list, and then we're going to bring this to an end. So I would turn to Heather McDougall.
Thank you, Moderator. In one of the reports that will be coming before us, the role of Moderator and Executive Secretary, or their responsibilities, one of the recommendations is that the moderator kind of not generate particular projects. And I guess I'm just wondering what your experience would like, how it would impact the church if you had not been able to generate some of those projects, which I think have been really valuable.
Thanks. I think that's a really great question. Some of my projects, I dreamed bigger than what we had the capacity or the relationships to encounter, or that for them to be successful, which I think was good because we have to work at becoming less risk averse and being willing to try new things even when they fail. And that doesn't mean that we are failures. It just means we learned something about why something didn't work. But it was a huge push. And I think not only with me, but sometimes with previous moderators, we're trying to have the staff in the general counsel office be focused and disciplined and doing less. And then you have this one person who comes in and is like, I have this big, beautiful idea for the church. And 3 years is not enough time to really plan and execute well on things without throwing everything into a huge tailspin. And now that we have the call and vision of the church and we have a strategic plan for the national church, and many regional councils are working on their strategic plans, I think that there is ways for the moderator in the future to use that as the primary means through which they'll engage with the church, to become an ambassador for the call and vision, which I hope will be the thing that unites us. I wrote about that in my report. And so we also have to be realistic about the resources, the financial resources and the staff resources that we have. I was deeply grateful to the foundation. I'm looking at Sarah Charters, the president of the foundation at the moment, because they funded a huge piece of the Regenerate program for us. And I think it's just, we need to be pragmatic and also find ways in, it's not to say that the moderator won't have any project work, but that work would be in some ways planned for and shepherded in partnership with staff, so that it's a little bit more balanced and a little bit less of a tornado blowing through the GCO every 3 years.
Friends, I did say that we're going to have the speakers list cut off, so I'm going to go to the last question on that, and that would be turning to Adeje Akintayo, please.
My name is Reverend Adedeji from Nakwaka Regional Council. First, I want to commend the leadership of the moderator. I was privileged to meet you at Cedar Park United Church when you visited our regional council, and you taught us a lot of things about flourishing. So my question about this flourishing, that Harvard University is talking about it, Vatican is talking about it. What is your plan for this in future?
So one of the really amazing things that happened is because we were planning the Flourishing Project at the same time as the Organizational Development and Strategy Unit was growing the Growth and Ministry Development team, we actually implemented the Flourishing Workshops in partnership with that team, with the Reverend Cam Fraser, who is the director of that team, and all of the growth animators. And that resource will be developed into a ChurchX course that can be used by congregations, where there's some recorded content and then discussion activities that can be done at the congregational level, but also the growth animators are available to come and continue to do that project with our communities of faith across the country, or with clusters. And so that's a resource that will continue to live with the church. I'm really grateful for the partnership with the Growth and Ministry Development team.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. And moderator, thank you very much for your responses. I would just like to add my thanks for the amazing ministry that you have done for the church and for the General Council in these past years. We deeply appreciate that ministry, and we'll continue to hold you in prayer from now until August. Okay, and in August too. All right, great.
Thank you.
And so, moderator, I turn the chair back over to you.
Thank you. All right, friends. Just doing a quick time check. We're now only about 6 minutes behind schedule. And this is a time for our General Secretary to give his report. So I will invite you to come to the lectern. He's going to walk in front of the camera because it's the fastest, easiest way to get over there. And I'll turn the time over to you. I think I might have turned that off.
Thank you, Moderator, and members of the General Council. In addition to my written report, which I apologize has been fairly lengthy, there are 3 parts to my written report. The first part, Section A, provides an overview of some of the pieces of work that we have been engaged in. Part B addresses the strategic plan, and so it's an oversight of the work of the strategic plan and the various strategic objectives that the General Counsel Office has been working on for the last 3 years. And the third piece of my written report offers an overview of the work of our Global Partnership Program. In addition to my report, I want to do 3 things this morning or afternoon. First of all, just to lift up some of the pieces of work that we've been engaged in over the last couple of years, to talk about looking towards the future, and then I want to say something about the staff team. As you know, we have just completed the celebration of our centennial. The national service took place at Gower Street United Church in St. John's, Newfoundland, and that was an incredible opportunity for the church to celebrate its life and ministry and witness. And we were grateful to be joined by a number of former moderators and former general secretaries as well, in addition to some ecumenical guests. And I must say that I was quite heartened to see across the church the various gatherings and opportunities that were created either by local congregations or regional councils or clusters of churches to celebrate the centennial. Since 2022, we have been engaging in the development of a strategic plan. Strategic plan was intended to articulate for us where we were going or how we see ourselves as the United Church of Canada. A part of that strategic plan was the call and vision to the church, and of course, the 6 words of deep spirituality, bold discipleship, and daring justice. A part of rolling out that strategic plan and the strategic objectives was a commitment to growth. And it was under the context of deepening the church's capacity to offer invitation. I must confess that I'm delighted to say that the emphasis on growth has begun to show signs of life across the church. And I'm thankful to the staff group that continues to lead that. As part of that, our growth initiative, we have launched recently the initiative A Place at the Table. It was launched on Holy Thursday at Metropolitan United Church here in Toronto. This is intended to be a conversational piece and an invitational piece to encourage Canadians to take a look again at the United Church and to lift up the capacity or the ethos of the church in terms of its commitment to inclusion. As part of that initiative as well, we have launched 100 tables. And this is an initiative inviting congregations, communities of faith across the country to showcase their commitment to justice, compassion, and radical belonging. And these are, for me, incredible signs of life and hope in the life of the church. And I trust that across the church we will begin to see these and celebrate these signs springing forth of life in the United Church. It was an attempt, and it continues to be an attempt by us to reimagine and to stop talking about decline, and to recognize that God, as I often say, is not finished with us in the United Church of Canada as yet. So, Moderator, those are some highlights of the past. I want to just transition a bit to talk about some of the future direction. Isaiah 43 reminds us that God is doing a new thing, and that God has invited us to pay attention to what God is doing. And I'm reminded of a reflection by Walter Brueggemann in his discussion of the book of Jeremiah. And Brueggemann says, "The world for which you have been so carefully prepared is being taken away from you by the grace of God." And we are in this place and in this time where everything we know is being upended. And part of the challenge for us in the United Church, as a friend of mine often says, is that we need to ensure that we're not fixing yesterday's problems, but that we're leaning into a future of hope and promise. And so there are a number of things, Moderator, that as we look ahead, we are committed to work towards. We have to rethink how we do our governance in the life of this church. I know that part of the change in the structure from 2015 was attempting to do that, but yet I think our governance process continues to be a challenge for us. One of the pieces that the executive has asked the structural review task group to do is to look at the possibility of other economical ways to gather as a general council. So we will spend some time over the next triennium addressing the question of how we can have a governance structure that is effective and efficient and enables us to do the work that God has called us to do. The second piece is that we need to reimagine how we fund the work of the church. And later on, when we get to Calgary, we will have a proposal around assessment as one of the ways in which we are proposing some changes to the assessment formula that would enable us to think about how we fund the work. There's also a proposal that will be coming in when we get to Calgary on renewing the commitment from 2015 that up to 10% of mission and service funds be available for the work of renewing the life of the church. The third thing is that we need to shift from a perspective of scarcity to a perspective of abundance. Marty Tyndall, when she served as moderator, that was one of her themes. what we have done over the years is that we have leaned into a position of scarcity where in many ways we have cut and cut and cut out of a sense that we want to have a balanced budget, but in our cutting, what we have done is limited our capacity to actually advance the ministry to which we are called. And so we will be thinking about and doing work around how we move from a perspective of scarcity to abundance. We need to rethink how we do the work of justice in the life of the church. We are known as a church that is committed to justice, but in some ways we have these little pockets of individuals who are engaging, and we haven't collectively as a denomination dug deep into the possibility and the capacity of being agents of justice in the world. And so we will be thinking about that. Finally, we will be needing to reorient ourselves. And so two issues of reorientation. One is leadership. Leadership, 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 leadership. Leadership matters. And so we will seek to engage a number of initiatives that will help us to reimagine and provide support and encouragement to the development of leadership in the life of the church. The second orientation is how we move from the deep congregationalism that is part of the life of this denomination to a perspective of the whole. And that perspective of the whole means that we need to begin to think about how it is that we ensure that the values of the denomination continues to have impact in the life of the Canadian society. So those are some pieces that we'll be looking at as we move forward. Moderator, finally, I want to express my deep gratitude to the staff team that I have the privilege of leading. Particularly want to recognize the Regional Council Executive Ministers and the Executive Ministers and Ministry teams leaders here in the General Council office. I'm grateful for their time and effort and energy, their care, their compassion, and their commitment to the work of the church. I particularly want to just lift a couple of things up. Since the last General Council, Eric Matheson has retired as the Executive Officer for Finances, and we have been so blessed to have Harry Lee in the role as the new Executive Officer for Finance. And Harry brings some significant gifts and have contributed significantly to the life of the church to this point in time. Patty Talbot, after almost 40 years of providing leadership and support to our global ministry program, has retired, and we are grateful for her ministry and leadership. In the Regional Council, Rosemary Lambie retired, left us, and Eric Hebert-Daly has assumed the role of the two Eastern Ontario and the Quebec Regional Council, and Eric has brought some fresh skills and gifts, and we're grateful for his leadership. I stole Charlene from her Regional Council and asked Charlene to come into the General Council office to support the work of governance, and I am appreciative for Charlene's contribution there. And Mark Laird has been appointed as the Executive Minister for the 3 Western regions. So these colleagues I'm grateful for. And finally, just to say that at the end of this year, Alan Hall will be retiring. Sorry, I should go back. Alan Hall will be retiring, and I just want to express my gratitude for Alan's leadership over the course of the year. Moderator, this is both my report to the council.
Thank you, General Secretary. So this is we have a few minutes, although not many, to have a time for questions. We'll try to keep it to 5 minutes. And so I'll recognize Joshua Bell. Oh, 1 second, Joshua, we can't hear you.
Oh, wait.
There we go. Now I can hear you.
You can? Okay, perfect. My name is Joshua Bell, and I'm a commissioner from the Living Skies Regional Council. And my question for the General Secretary is, in light of the centennial, I'm wondering whether there's a plan to specifically engage youth and young people who are part of our church in the strategic planning for the century ahead.
Yeah, you wanted to exit. Sorry.
All right. Thanks, Joshua. I see a number of other speakers, and so in the interest of time, we're going to do the same thing we did with Alan and Jane. And so I'll ask the General Secretary to keep notes and on the questions, and I'll take a group of questions all together. Next question will be from Steve Barabay.
Thank you, Moderator. Steve Barabay, he, him. I'm a commissioner from Funday St. Lawrence, Dawning Waters. And Michael, thank you for your leadership. I am curious how the justice principles have affected your role and the work of the denomination overall from your perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Katie Avon.
Hi, Katie Avon. I'm a commissioner from Bermuda, Nova Scotia. General Secretary, I would really like to hear where you see sources of abundance. We've talked a little bit about operating out of the model of scarcity, and I want to know where you see abundance and life seeding in our church. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Liz McKenzie.
Liz McKenzie, General Council Commissioner from Shining Waters Region, She, Her. Thank you, General Secretary, for all your work. And I am wondering about the comment around moving from congregational to ministry of the whole, as it affects the scarcity abundance conversation and the justice conversation, and whether you see places where we can work toward the vision in Acts that says every day shared, every day common, as a way of making us a more thriving denomination across.
All right, and we have one more question from Owang Kwan.
Thank you, Moderator. And thank you for your commitment. And I'm so glad that I have this opportunity to ask a question to Reverend Michael Blair, General Secretary. Thank you. And also, I'm so thankful to the General Secretary for your ministry for making the United Church more invitational. That's great. So, I want to hear from you about your vision for making the United Church more invitational. And in addition, invitation is to be least to just making newcomers more committed and dedicated to the church. So I wonder whether you have some vision for the ministry for the developing leadership, committed leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Owang. Those are all of the speakers that have been named, and so I will turn it to the General Secretary to answer, and then we'll move on. You can have like 5 minutes. You can have 5 minutes. You're not the boss. You're not the boss of me.
We have abundance of time. So if I'll take probably the question about the invitational and the congregational whole and the abundance. I think part of the abundance we have is in the people that we have in the life of the church. The people of the United Church, I think, have so much to offer in terms of ministry leadership, in terms of building relationship and connecting with communities. And in some ways, I think one of the pieces, and so I'm deeply appreciative of the work on the ministry statement, because it reinforces again the need for us to invest in the lay members of the United Church of Canada. They are our resources. They are involved in ministry. I think part of the abundance also comes from the fact that for so long we have been talking about the fact that we are dying. And the reality is that people don't give to stuff they know that's dying. People want to invest in something that is thriving and will make an impact. And so I think, again, position in our lives, recognizing, lifting up the stories of God being at work in the life of the church, and to remind folks that God is at work and God has invited them to partner in what God's doing in terms of building communities of life and healing, is something that's very important, and as part of that work of harvesting the abundance that exists in the church. And so the shift to telling our stories, the shift to working, I think are places where that will, I'm confident, will begin to kind of make a difference in the life of the church, as people see that we are committed to engaging and seeing life happens. I think the other tied in with that is that most of us value the United Church as because of its commitment to inclusivity, because of its commitment to diversity, because of its commitment to working collaboratively with other ecumenical partners. And one of the challenges we have is that most of us have a stronger sense of our local identity rather than the national identity. And I think what we need to be able to do is to enable folks to begin to connect to the larger identity. And the fact is that the question of how is it that we ensure that the values of the church that we love continue into the future. And so, for example, I think because we're so locally bound, when properties get sold, the temptation is to offer those resources locally rather than to invest in the denomination as a whole. And so it's an imaginative thing that will happen. So I have ideas, and part of my role is to create a context so that a context so that the church is free to imagine and to risk. And so I think the work we've done around the strategic plan, the work we are doing around towards 2035, and you'll hear more about that when you get to Calgary, the work like we've invested in the Regenerate program and other things are part of those spaces of liberating the United Church to dream again of God's possibility for the places and the people in which we encounter. In terms of youth, one of the things we've identified in the Towards 2035 is the need to invest in First Third ministries. And I think out of those processes, the youth and young adults who are part of the church today will have space to be able to help shape the future of it. I think the justice principles, I would say final justice principles, provide a certain level of liberation in that we're able to engage multiple issues. and recognize that we don't live in a world that's just one or the other, but it allows us to live in what I call the nuances. And every issue that we face are issues of nuanced. And so the principles allow us to be live into the nuance rather than to the kind of the dichotomy of either or. The principles allow us to live into a both and world.
Thank you, General Secretary, and to all those who asked questions. So friends, for the next hour, we're going to be having some time learning about the ministry-themed proposals that have come from the regions, and I invite Kenji Marui, our Chair of Business, to come and do the next presentation.
Well, welcome to the first stage of our three-step business process of learning, discussing, and deciding. Now, I've talked about it for so long. Can you believe we are doing this? Our time now will be spent learning about regional council proposals related to ministry leadership. Some pose big picture questions about ministry and vocation. Others ask about employment-related matters like compensation, conflict, and review processes. And others relate to congregational dynamics, such as the role of ministry and personnel committees. Clarifying questions have been asked and answered in the forum found on the Chime platform. And a quick note for future to please make separate inquiries for each proposal and also clearly identify the proposal you are asking about. The character limit field has been increased for future conversations. Now, I hope you've had a chance to read through that exchange, and if you have further questions for clarification, verification, or information, you can ask them of the resource people who've been identified to respond. Our goal in this almost hour is to ensure that you understand the issues raised by the regional councils. So without further ado, let's learn through the clarifying questions you need to ask, remembering that the clarifying questions are about understanding the proposal and not debating its merits, and that such questions may have already been asked and answered in Chime. So please be ready to indicate when you wish to speak to the floor from the Engagement tab on the Chime platform sidebar when that proposal is named. Those people responding to those questions, you should be in the virtual stage for remote presenters already, and if not, please make your way there and be ready to reply. The proposals will follow the published order of listing for discussion groups, with the exceptions of TICIF 01, Vocations of the Whole People of God, and GCE 02, Total Compensation Review, which have already been presented and learned about. And so first up, we have Western Ontario Waterways, WOW02, Administration of Sacraments for Retired Diaconal Ministers. And there was one question and answer on the clarifying question section of the platform. This asks to amend current policy to allow regional councils to grant sacramental license to retired diaconal ministers upon request. And I have next to me Executive Minister Jennifer Jansen-Ball with a quick piece.
Thanks. Before you start, Jennifer, I'm just going to ask that the folks who are assigned from the regions to be available to answer questions, if you can now request to speak to the floor as we practiced in training, just so that you're in the virtual stage, so that you're there queued up when it comes time to do those.
Thanks, Moderator. I just wanted to speak to the question which wondered if there was an oversight in the manual and not including sacraments for diaconal ministers. And in fact, it speaks to our understanding of the ministries of both streams of the order of ministry. So ordained ministers are ordained to a ministry of word, sacrament, and pastoral care. Diaconal ministers are commissioned to a ministry of education, service, and pastoral care. And so it's not an oversight in the manual that sacramental license isn't automatically granted to diaconal ministers.
So sorry. I was getting chatted to about process and also talked to about process. So are there any questions? Bob, do you have a question or are you there for later? Okay. David, Leighton Brown.
Yeah, thank you. I believe I'm unmuted now. My question is that the recommendation would modify 1.2.4.2, and which states this license will be for the duration of the call, appointment, or other ministry position. I wonder what the duration would be in this context of a request from a retired diaconal minister.
So can we have Judy Zarubik up to answer the question? Judy, can you request to speak so we can pull you up to present you?
I can't.
I can hear you.
Sorry, I got kicked out of the other meeting, so
So Judy, did you hear David's question?
yes, I did.
Okay, can you answer it, please?
So he wants to know what the duration is of the retired diaconal minister. So I would think the duration would be the length of the retirement.
Was that your question, David?
Yes, I wanted to see whether the duration of the license would be for a specific period of time or a specific function, or would it be for the duration of the retired life of the diaconal minister?
Okay. Thank you, David. Next question is from Emma Simone.
Emma Simone, she, her, Prairie to Pine Commissioner. I was wondering if the originators thought of retired designated lay ministers at all and why they may have decided not to include them in the changes.
Judy?
So basically, they were looking at the fact that ordered ministers, which are diaconal and ordained. So they were looking at the order of ministry and why there was a difference between in that order of ministry. So no, they looked at the fact that designated lay ministers are on a different stream. And so the question was, why does diaconal and ordained being in the same stream have different they have the same responsibilities, the same accountability. Why don't they have the same responsibilities, or does that make sense?
It makes sense. I guess for my designated lay minister colleagues, particularly my retired colleagues, often have the same responsibility and the same accountability. So it's interesting to me that maybe that's not the case across the church.
Thanks, Emma. David Keith Whiting. David, are you there? No? All right. Roz Vincent Haven. Also not there. Keith Kaiser.
Okay. There now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was just I may have missed something in this process, but from the first speaker, in the 1.2.4.2 amendment, it was my feeling that at the end of that second sentence, you added, or the term specified in the request, such that the intention would be the diaconical minister would request the privilege for a term and that it would be granted for that term. That term could be the end of his
retirement, or it could be for this specific purpose.
I would say that would be correct.
Thank you.
Michelle Armstrong. Michelle?
Sorry, I was having trouble getting to the other area to respond.
Oh, okay.
To you responded.
Sorry. Thanks, Michelle. You have to join the virtual stage. There should be a pop-up, and I think Encore is looking for you to join that.
Yeah, I got to the launch, but it wouldn't let me launch it.
Okay. Can you try again, and can you call tech support if you need help getting there? And I'm going to move on to Louise Hall.
Hello.
Hi, we can see you and hear you.
Okay, thank you. My question is, Louise Hall, Antler River Watershed Regional Council, and I'm a commissioner. I am a lay rep, so maybe I just don't know something, but why are ordained ministers automatically given the right to keep doing the sacraments when they retire? Why can't diaconal ministers be given the same privilege?
That's what this proposal is suggesting.
No, it isn't. It's saying upon their request.
Yes. And I think basically, so one of the things that we were trying to avoid was making it that this had to go to a remit. So they would have to request it. So my understanding, and so any of the parliamentarians or the people who are, know more about the manual than I do, my understanding is that on commissioning, they are given sacramental privileges because when you are commissioned, you have to have a pastoral charge to be appointed or called to. So when you get, then it's given. And then if you change your appointment or your call, then you have that community of faith has to request it again. And when you retire, you need to request it again. That's my understanding. I can be corrected if I am in error, but that's what I understand.
So, Judy, I'll just ask the General Secretary to add about the different types of call and ordered ministry.
Moderator, I'm asking Jennifer Jansen-Ball to respond.
Thank you, General Secretary and Moderator. So we understand that those who are ordained and commissioned are serving lifelong vocations of ministry to the church, and that there are particular functions attached to each of those streams of ministry. So those who are ordained to word, sacrament, and pastoral care, and so they don't get licenses once they're ordained for sacraments. Once they're ordained, that is their license by virtue of ordination, and that lasts through the lifetime of their ministry in the church. Diaconal ministers are commissioned to education, service, and pastoral care. Those who are in calls, appointments, or in other recognized ministries are, in the manual right now, are to be given automatically license to conduct the sacraments. Upon retirement, then they're not in a call, appointment, or recognized ministry, and so they would not automatically have a license to celebrate the sacraments. However, the provision is in the manual right now that they may be granted a license for the sacraments. So it's a difference in how we have historically and currently understood those two streams of ministry.
And I would go further to say that this proposal is basically saying, we understand this is what the manual says, but that asking the region not to may give them a license if they ask, but must, because it's different across the denomination. Some regions say no, even when they ask, and other regions say yes. So we're trying to make it across the board that if diaconal ministers on retirement ask for sacramental privileges, that the region must grant it, not may grant it.
Thank you. Roz Vincent Haven.
Yeah, my question is around the clarification of what the first person, Roz Vincent Haven, Western Waterloo Region General Counsel, Regional Counsel, and it's she, her. So my question is around the time of the function. What does that mean? And I just want to clarify, after people are retired, they still, if they're part of the order of ministry, I am a diaconal minister, there are many times where I'm asked to administer the sacrament, and as quite frankly, I didn't realize I had to reapply and request. I have that now, but I visit the sick. I'm a them in my congregation, volunteer associate minister. I'm also a pastoral stars supervisor. So there are times, and that work continues after I'm no longer full-time service. So the wondering is, do those count as being, and should they count across the church, those roles for folks who have the label of diaconal ministry? Thank you.
So as personally, I think yes.
Thank you, Roz, and to Judy. That was the end of the questions for the Western Ontario Waterways proposal, so I'll turn it back to Kenji.
Moving on then to East Central Ontario, ECO01, making sabbaticals easier, asking to amend sabbatical policy and consider support fund for communities of faith. On the Chime platform, there was one question asked there, and Brian Nicholson will be offering further clarification in this time now.
All right, if you have any questions about East Central Ontario 01 making sabbaticals easier, can you please request to speak to the floor? Yeah. All right, seeing no requests for clarification for this proposal, we'll move on to the next one.
All right. Then we are on to Bermuda, Nova Scotia. BNS01, Clergy Housing Assistance, asking to expand Capital Assistance Fund to include loans for housing down payments. There was one question asked and answered on the Chime platform, but for further clarification, we have Ross Bartlett on hand.
All right, friends, any questions for clarification? And a reminder that you'll have time to discuss this later. It's just to clarify. All right, Sarah Kerwin. Sarah?
Good morning, Sarah Kerwin, Pacific Mountain Regional Council Commissioner. My question with this is around why are we not mentioning rent, I suppose? Because we've listed out a number of ways that we're lacking and there's serious problems, but I'm just wondering where the question around rental housing is.
Ross.
Thank you for that. The issue of rent is tied into the cost of living, the COL portion of a clergy salary, and acknowledge that the COL in many areas of the country does not match the rental value of accommodation, and there is in many parts of the country a significant shortage of rental accommodation available. However, what we're looking at here is the opportunity for people to get into the purchase market, the housing market, as opposed to the rental market, because this would be a one-time payment to help, for example, with the down payment on purchase. How you would work at this to supplement the COL for different people across the country regarding rental accommodation would be another area of exploration. It's a great idea. It's just not within this particular proposal.
Thank you, Ross and Sarah. Gail Burkett. Oh, Gail, I think you're your mic is muted. Thank you. There you go.
Hello, Gail Burkett, Shining Waters Commissioner. It still says loans/grants. I find that the grants is problematic.
The grant part may well be problematic. This allows General Counsel to determine what form of support it wants to offer. We figured we could try for grants, and if we as General Counsel decided loans are more appropriate, then that's an amendment that could be offered through the Way Forward team.
All right, friends, I'm just going to remind us we're asking only questions of clarification, and that any discussion or positions on the proposals will be reserved for the discussion groups. The next question I see is Owang Kwan.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Owang Kwan, Commissioner, Chinook Winds region. Yeah, my pronouns are he and him. My question is, here in your motion, in your proposal, I wonder whether the ministry personnel would be eligible for receiving loans from the United Church, for down payment, because actually, people know that for down payment we need gifted money. So could you make a clarification on this?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
Actually, the bank, to buy a house, we need to pay a down payment, right? Make a down payment.
Correct.
Yeah. And actually, the money for down payment needs to be gift, not loan.
This would be money loaned from the church to the member of the order or the clergy, so that they could put together enough money to make the down payment on the purchase. There's no other source. Some congregations are very generous and able to help clergy with the down payment, and we thank them for that. Many communities of faith are not, and so we're looking to the shared resources of the church to try and find a source for that down payment so that the process can even begin.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Louise Hall.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Louise Hall, Antler River Watershed Regional Council, Commissioner. I'm just looking at the second and third paragraph. It's saying the pastoral relations liaisons will encourage and assist congregations to consider the way. And then in the third paragraph, the payment and loan grants will go to the general council only after there are no other resources available. What kind of training are you thinking about? Like, a lot of liaisons don't have that kind of expertise. There would have to be some training. That's all I'm.
What we have in mind is not an extensive training, but just an awareness on the part of the liaison that if this policy is adopted by the General Council, that resource is available. What we're trying to deal with is the place where conversations about a call or an appointment come to a halt because of the accommodation question. And so to make liaisons aware that there is another alternative if accommodation is the sticking point.
But not once all other avenues have been looked into.
This would be one that could be suggested along with all other avenues, and all the other avenues are relatively limited, but this would be one.
Thank you.
Vicki McPhee.
Thank you, moderator. It's Vicki McPhee. I'm a commissioner from Chinook Winds region. I just wanted to ask or to think I'm clarifying Okwan's question, which was, in our experience of purchasing a home, the down payment could not be considered a loan. And I think that's what he was concerned about, that if you get a loan, it is still a liability and the bank doesn't like that. And I think that's what he was, the question he was asking, as opposed to a grant. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sufficiently aware of banking realities to be able to answer that question. Hopefully, somebody can, and that I'm afraid is not me.
Okay. I'll see if we can get an answer to that question from someone. In the meantime, I'm going to ask Keith Kaiser. Not ask you to answer the question. I'm going to invite you to ask a question.
Did identify myself before. I'm Antler River Commissioner. First, on that last question, that was part of my thing. It will definitely impact, would not be able to be used for a down payment if it is a loan in the bank's eyes or the lender's eyes. Second point, has anybody considered the tax income implications of this benefit? Because there would also be definitely implications of that aspect also.
We are aware of the latter, yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Cindy Casey.
Hi, Cindy Casey. I am a commissioner. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm from the Eastern Ontario Outaouais Regional Council. My question is this going to be, is twofold, that this would be an opportunity for one time, and the other would be that how do we, have we looked even at the possibility that maybe having manses is no longer the viable way? and so that there's some even playing field there, or is having a manse such a large benefit to certain groups that's not even a possibility? That's what I was wondering.
There are, as I understand it, there are about 10% of pastoral charges that have manses currently, but less than half of those are actually available because they're being used for other ministry purposes. I do know anecdotally of a couple of pastoral charges that have actually purchased manses in the last few years in order to address this issue. The purchase of a manse would be a significant process for a pastoral charge to undertake and may or may not be accessible. The reason for clergy entering the housing market, at least one of them, is the whole matter of building equity for retirement. And so we thought that we would try to support the current movement towards clergy ownership, setting aside, of course, the whole question of rental for the moment, clergy ownership. The regulations and the rules about how this would be done and whether it would be a one-time thing would clearly need to be worked out by the general counsel office staff and the finance people.
Just to clarify, I suggested the opposite, that we no longer have manses. That for that 10%, that we say, keep the building, you can rent it, you can do whatever, but that we take manses out of the equation and help congregations build that, because I agree that piece of being able to save for retirement and having a house makes a difference for sure.
So I'm going to interrupt because we are going to discuss the proposal in our discussion sessions, and we were only to be asking clarifying questions here.
Yes, sorry, I was just clarifying that wasn't my question that was being answered.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
It's okay.
Thank you, Ross, and thank you to all the folks that asked questions. I am going to invite the General Secretary to provide clarity on the answer that Ross couldn't answer.
Moderator, from what we know, a grant to an individual is prohibited by CRA, and the amount would be treated as taxable. So just to be aware of that. And the reality is that most banks require you to have the resources on your own, and because if you have a loan, the bank would see that as an additional liability. So there's some challenges to the CRA requirement and some of the bank legalities around the proposal, but just to say that.
Thanks, General Counsel or General Secretary. Is it lunchtime yet? All right, and thank you to Ross for being willing to clarify questions. Our next proposal, I'll turn it over to Kenji.
Thank you. Yes, General Counsel, we are going to clarify any questions around Chinook Winds CW01 mediation of cost of living group assignment disputes. On the Chime platform, there was one question asked, and this proposal seeks to authorize regional councils to mediate cost of living differences within the same community. And Kathy Yamashita is on hand to respond.
Friends, any clarifying questions about the mediation of cost of living group assignment disputes? All right, seeing none. Before we go to the next proposal, Allison McEwen, I think you are to respond to Horseshoe Falls 04, and that's after Ryan does the next one. And so if you could join the virtual stage, that would be super. So I'll turn it over to Kenji.
Moving back into East Central Ontario, ECO02, reviewing ministry and personnel committee's role and function. On the Chime platform, we didn't have any questions raised there, but if you have any now, Ryan McNally is available to respond.
Thanks, Kenji. Any questions for Ryan McNally about reviewing MMP committee's role and function? All right. Seeing none. Did Allison McEwen join the virtual stage yet? Okay. We will come back to that proposal. Oh, she is here? Okay, Allison, thank you. So, Kenji?
So, Horseshoe Falls Regional Council presented to us HF04, Vocational Review and Discipline Accountability. There were 6 questions and answers on the Chime platform ahead of this. It's oversight of Office of Vacations, smart requirements, central repository of information and access to information for respondents. And so Allison McEwen is available to clarify from the region, but I believe General Secretary also had a statement. Oh,
so General Secretary's clarification is already posted on Chime.
All right, so okay, so questions then for the region.
So any questions? Sarah Kerwin.
Good morning, Sarah Kerwin, Pacific Mountain Regional Council. I have 2 questions on this. The first of which, when I was reading through it, I want to be very clear. One of the recommendations here is to create an oversight body for the oversight body. Is that correct?
Allison?
So it's at least to have a process of oversight for the oversight body. Yeah, okay. So not necessarily to create a body itself, but to have at least a process in place. Yes.
Okay, because the language does say establish a discipline process oversight body. So I just wanted to be clear that like there's, okay.
Okay.
Then the other piece of this was I was concerned about, I guess it was the 4th bullet point. I wanted to clarify something. The review of all documents piece. Can you just clarify for me whether that means a person subject to a disciplinary process would then see everything from like all of the interviews and potentially having like private information shared, or is there some sort of like standard against that?
So I think, so are you talking about the central repository thing or the review of documents? No, okay, so the other one, and it does, yeah, and so I think it does say, okay, I think that the intention is with the subject's approval, right? So, and the subject's advocate could actually be the subject's lawyer. So, or another advocate, but anyway, so it would definitely be with the subject's approval.
Yeah, I guess I wonder what the term confidential review actually means. I guess that would be the clarifying question. What does confidential review mean? Does that mean identifying data is removed? Does that mean names and titles are removed? In small congregations, it might be very easy to tell who said what. So I would be questioning what that means in terms of confidential review. Just maybe some terminology clarification there.
Yeah, I'm not sure entirely. Yeah, I'm not going to start to speculate because that would just be a bad thing. So yeah, I'm not totally sure.
All right, thanks, Allison and Sarah. I see no other questions, so we'll move on to the next proposal.
East Central Ontario, ECO 04, Training on Conflict and Change. On the platform, we had 3 questions asked. General Counsel Office requested to offer regular training on conflict resolution and change management. And Brian Nicholson is, I think, available to respond on behalf of the Regional Council for clarity.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any further clarifying questions? Okay, seeing none.
Some of these pieces are so clear and forthright that no clarity is abundantly clear. Fundy St. Lawrence Donning Waters Regional Council puts forward FSLDW02, Modernizing Human Resources Models Within the United Church of Canada. Has, I think, a few categories within that to research workplace issues and ministry personnel practices, offering low-stakes initial responses and pilot projects. There were 3 questions asked on the Chime platform, and Michelle Armstrong is on hand now to respond to anything further.
All right, any clarifying questions for Michelle? All right, seeing none. Next proposal.
East Central Ontario, 05, change for church hub access for ministry personnel, asking to allow ministers to access church hub information regarding vacancies without having to make themselves available for call. On the platform, no questions were asked, but we do have Ryan McNally available if there are any questions for clarity now.
All right. Anybody who has clarifying questions for Ryan? All right. I see one. Jane McDonald. All right, Jane.
Thank you, moderator. My question would be for a community of faith that's actually searching. If this were to go through, then would the community of faith that's actually searching only be able to see ministers that have actually ticked the box and made themselves available for a call? Or would they see all ministers across the country?
So the way that this proposal came to me as kind of the convener of some proposals, it was mostly looking at what ministry personnel would see and not looking at what communities of faith see. So it was about opening it up so that ministry personnel would be able to see more. Although in theory, if you opened it up the other way, that would allow communities of faith to go out and look at our gifts and skills profiles and maybe find people who don't know that there is a church out there to which God might be calling them. So I could see it working both ways.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if it would lead to confusion within the community of faith. So thank you very much for your answer.
I think clergy already get emails as well. So saying you should apply here. This might be another way of doing it.
Okay, true.
It's called passive recruiting.
Passive recruiting.
All right, seeing no other clarifying questions, I will say thank you to Jane and to Ryan. And we can go to the next proposal.
Let's move to Pacific Mountain region, PM06, denominational pay equity, asking for pay equity between general council staff and community of faith staff. On the Chime platform, there were 3 questions asked there, but we have Bob Fillier available to respond to any further questions for clarity.
Bob, I think we need you to join the virtual stage, not to request to speak to the floor, because that way we can have both you and the person who wants to ask. It's okay? Okay, so I see a question from Shane Goldie, and so we'll put Bob and Shane both on the screen. Thank you.
Yes, I have my echo. Reverend Shane Goldie from Northern Spirit Region and an Indigenous Commissioner. I just would like some clarification on what is the definition of equity and fair compensation. With reading through the proposal, the writers of the proposal believe that there's an unfair equity pay balance, and it says fair, equitable benefit plan and compensation to all employees. But with looking at the cost of living adjustments for ministry personnel compared to the regional office and regional council staff, when looking at the 15-year pay difference, for a category 1, the max is $168,179.51. So is the amount difference of a category 15 year and category 1 for $65,973 taken into account of what is fair and equitable across the board, no matter what court?
Moderator, I believe the proposal that was forwarded to the General Council speaks to the discrepancy between the 2.5% and 3% wage increase. The language that's used around fair, equitable, and I guess maybe adequate reflects language that is used in other documents that currently exist from the General Council. So the idea behind it is that regardless of which unit you happen to be employed by within the denomination, whether that's a community of faith or a regional council or the general council, particularly as order of ministry folk, but as church employees in general, then if the decision is that the cost of living increase for that year is a certain percentage, then it should apply to all staff across the church, regardless of who their employing unit happens to be.
Thank you, Bob. I have a question from Daniel McDonald.
Hi, folks. Daniel McDonald, Bermuda, Nova Scotia region. I can't seem to turn on a video at the second, but I am here.
That's okay. We can hear you clear.
My question is related to point D, where it asks about authorizing regional councils to fund discrepancies. I was just wondering what exactly that might mean. Is that related to kind of empowering regional councils to top up staff salaries?
Moderator, that's exactly one of the ways forward that we were proposing, would be that if there was a discrepancy like there is for this current fiscal year, that regional councils could choose to say, we're going to balance that ourselves by adding a 0.5% increase funded by the regional council.
Thank you.
Thank you to the those who asked questions, and to Bob. I see no more questions about this proposal, so I will ask Kenji to introduce the last one.
Staying with Pacific Mountain Region, PM05, salary continuance for General Council office staff, and Bob remains in the room to respond. We did have one question asked on the Chime platform earlier.
Any further clarifying questions for Bob Fillier about the salary continuance for GCO staff? All right, seeing none. Friends, we have come in right on schedule. So you have earned yourself a 90-minute break, and we will see you back here at 3:30 Eastern Time. Thank you so much, everybody, for a great first half of our meeting.